Did you know the king had flops? Ever wonder which Elvis songs tanked? Can a legend like Elvis Presley actually fail? Number 8. Clean Up Your Own Backyard. 1969. How could a song from one of Elvis's movies miss the mark so badly? Released as part of the soundtrack for The Trouble with Girls, this tune peaked at a disappointing £35 on the Billboard Hot 100. The film itself wasn't exactly a blockbuster, which certainly didn't help the song's chances. Elvis delivered his signature vocal power, but audiences just weren't feeling it. The timing couldn't have been worse, competing with psychedelic rock and ground-raining music from bands like the Beatles and the Rolling Stones made Elvis's movie soundtrack song seem dated to many listeners. Critics later noted that the song actually contained some surprisingly pointed social commentary, with lyrics telling people to mind their own problems before criticizing others. The production featured a swampy southern rock feel that actually foreshadowed musical styles that would become popular years later. Despite its commercial disappointment, the track showed Elvis stretching creatively beyond typical movie soundtrack fare. Many dedicated Elvis fans consider this overlooked single an underappreciated gem in his massive catalog. Clean Up Your Own Backyard failed to make a significant impact at the time, but collectors and Elvis aficionados have since given it renewed attention. Its relative rarity compared to Elvis's hits makes original pressings particularly valuable among memorabilia hunters. The song occasionally appears on compilation albums focusing on Elvis's more obscure work but remains largely unknown to casual fans of the King. Number 7. You Don't Have to Say You Love Me. 1971. Ever heard Elvis cover a Dusty Springfield hit? When Elvis recorded his version of Springfield's signature song, expectations were high. Surprisingly, his powerful rendition only reached #11 on the charts, respectable for most artists, but considered underperforming by Elvis's lofty standards. The emotionally charged ballad showcased his incredible vocal range and seemed perfectly suited for him, making its commercial reception even more puzzling. Elvis recorded the song during his productive sessions at Nashville's RCA studio, a period that yielded numerous recordings. Industry insiders suggest the single may have suffered from being released during a particularly crowded season on the charts. Competition from emerging rock acts and changing musical tastes contributed to its underperformance. Additionally, RCA's promotional efforts focused on other Elvis projects at the time, potentially limiting this single's exposure. Live performances of You Don't Have to Say You Love Me often earned thunderous applause at Elvis's concerts, demonstrating the disconnect between chart performance and audience appreciation. The song became a staple of his live shows, despite its relatively disappointing commercial reception. Elvis's passionate delivery particularly shone during his 1972 tour performances, where he often extended the song's dramatic conclusion to showcase his vocal prowess. Recording engineers from the session later revealed that Elvis recorded multiple takes of the song, investing considerable time to perfect his interpretation. His commitment to the material was evident in the final product, making its commercial underperformance all the more surprising. The song has since gained recognition as one of Elvis's finest vocal performances, regardless of its chart position. Number 6, my boy, 1975. What happens when Elvis gets deeply personal? My Boy, a heart-wrenching ballad about divorce and its impact on children seemed perfectly timed with Elvis's own marital troubles with Priscilla. Despite the emotional connection and powerful delivery, the single stalled at pound 20 on the Billboard charts. The song's somber tone and relatively subdued arrangement may have contributed to its modest performance during an era dominated by disco and upbeat rock. Music historians note that Elvis's health and personal struggles were beginning to affect his career momentum during this period. The emotional weight he brought to My Boy was authentic, perhaps too raw for casual radio listeners seeking escapism. Originally a French composition titled Parce que t'aime, Mon Enfant, the English adaptation had been a hit for singer Richard Harris before Elvis recorded his version. Elvis's interpretation transformed the song, bringing a depth of feeling that revealed his own emotional state. Studio musicians present during the recording session described Elvis as being unusually focused and emotionally invested. Some believe the personal connection to the material, singing about a father separated from his child while experiencing his own painful separation from his daughter Lisa Marie, created one of his most authentic performances. The song performed better internationally than in the United States, reaching the top 10 in several European countries where audiences seemed more receptive to its melancholic tone. American radio programmers, however, gravitated toward more upbeat material in the mid-1970s. In subsequent years, My Boy has gained appreciation among Elvis's fan base, particularly among those who appreciate his later, more emotionally complex recordings. Number 5, Separate Ways, 1972. How painful is it when your own divorce inspires a song that flops? Released shortly after Elvis and Priscilla separated, this autobiographical ballad seemed destined for success, given its personal nature and emotional delivery. Instead, it peaked at pound 20, respectable but far below expectations, for a new Elvis single. The lyrics painfully detailed the breakdown of a relationship and its impact on all involved, particularly the children caught in the middle. The timing of the release coincided with tumultuous changes in Elvis's personal and professional life. His separation from Priscilla received extensive media coverage, creating a strange dynamic where listeners knew the song reflected his actual circumstances. Some radio programmers reportedly found the material too depressing for regular rotation, limiting its airplay potential during a time when lighter fare dominated the charts. Beyond its autobiographical aspects, Separate Ways featured one of Elvis's most nuanced vocal performances from his later career. The restraint and vulnerability he displayed contrasted sharply with his more bombastic hits. Session musicians involved in the recording commented on the palpable tension in the studio, with Elvis requiring fewer takes than usual, suggesting he connected immediately with the material in a deeply personal way. Music critics at the time gave the song mixed reviews, with some praising its emotional honesty while others criticized it as overly sentimental. In subsequent years, biographers and Elvis scholars have pointed to Separate Ways as a critical piece in understanding Elvis's artistic and personal journey during the 1970s. Though it didn't dominate the charts, the song revealed an artist willing to expose his pain publicly, something relatively rare for male performers of that era. Number 4, You'll Never Walk Alone, 1968. Can a gospel-infused rendition of a Broadway classic miss the mark? Elvis's powerful Take on the Rodgers and Hammerstein standard from Carousel seemed like a guaranteed hit, given his success with inspirational material. Surprisingly, it failed to chart entirely. The timing couldn't have been worse. Released during the psychedelic rock revolution of 1968, this traditional orchestral ballad seemed out of step with current trends. The song appeared on Elvis's album, How Great Thou Art, which ironically won him a Grammy Award for Best Sacred Performance. The disconnect between album success and single failure puzzled industry observers. Some music historians suggest that the single suffered from being perceived as too religious for pop radio but too theatrical for gospel audiences, essentially falling between established formats. Elvis's passionate delivery tout his vocal range and emotional depth, particularly during the song's climactic final verse. Recording studio documentation reveals that Elvis recorded the song in just a few takes, suggesting he connected deeply with its message of hope amid difficulty. The production featured a full orchestra and choir, creating a sweeping cinematic quality that distinguished it from the psychedelic and hard rock dominating radio at the time. This production style, while pouting Elvis's magnificent voice, may have contributed to the song's commercial challenges by seeming stylistically dated. Despite its commercial disappointment as a single, You'll Never Walk Alone became a treasured track among dedicated Elvis fans, particularly those who appreciated his gospel and inspirational recordings. Elvis would occasionally include the song in live performances, where audiences responded with tremendous enthusiasm, further highlighting the disconnect between chart performance and artistic merit. Years later, the song would be recognized as one of Elvis's most affecting vocal performances, regardless of its commercial impact. Number 3, Kentucky Rain, 1970. Would you believe a song written by Eddie Rabbitt could underperform? With its evocative storytelling and Elvis's emotional delivery, Kentucky Rain seemed destined for the top of the charts. Instead, it peaked at pound 16, considered disappointing by Elvis's standards. The atmospheric production, complete with the sound of piano mimicking raindrops, created a cinematic quality that showcased Elvis's continuing artistic evolution beyond his earlier rock and roll style. Industry analysts noted that the song's release coincided with a particularly competitive period on the pop charts. The lengthy recrind, nearly 4 minutes, also limited radio play in an era when shorter songs were preferred for fraud-making reasons. Elvis's vocal performance demonstrated remarkable restraint and emotional authenticity, building gradually throughout the narrative of a man searching desperately through a rainstorm for his lost love. Recording engineer Al Pachucki later revealed that capturing the distinctive piano part required multiple attempts to achieve the right raindrop effect. Session pianist David Briggs eventually delivered the memorable intro that sets the song's melancholy tone. Despite the creative effort invested, radio programmers seemed ambivalent about the single contributing to its underperformance relative to expectations for an Elvis release. Live performances of Kentucky Rain often featured extended arrangements that allowed Elvis to fully explore the song's emotional landscape. Concert recordings from his Las Vegas engagements reveal audiences responding enthusiastically to the song despite its modest chart showing. In retrospect, music critics have reassessed Kentucky Rain as representing some of Elvis's strongest narrative work, with his vocal perfectly embodying the desperation of the lovelorn protagonist, searching through storm-swept small towns. Number 2, Memories, 1969. Can a song from a triumphant comeback special fail to make an impact? Memories, the contemplative ballad from Elvis's legendary 1968 NBC television special, stalled at pound 35 despite the massive viewership and critical acclaim for the program. The intimate performance showcased a more mature, reflective Elvis, a stark contrast to the high-energy rock and roll numbers that dominated the special and reigned his career momentum. The song's wistful, nostalgic quality represented a new direction for Elvis, moving away from both his early rock persona and his movie soundtrack material toward more adult-oriented content. Written specifically for the TV special by Billy Strange and Mac Davis, Memories allowed Elvis to demonstrate his evolving artistry. The simple arrangement featuring Elvis seated with minimal accompaniment created an intimacy rarely seen in his previous work. Television viewers witnessed a powerful moment when Elvis performed the song, but this intimacy may not have translated to the single release. Radio programmers typically favored more uptempo material from Elvis, potentially limiting the song's airplay opportunities. Additionally, the single's release timing, competing with the massive success of In the Ghetto and Suspicious Minds from Elvis's American Sound Studio sessions, may have diverted attention from Memories. Despite its modest chart performance, Memories has endured as a significant recording in Elvis's catalog, particularly for painting his ability to convey emotional depth and vulnerability. The song has frequently appeared on compilation albums, focused on Elvis's ballads, and has gained appreciation over time for representing a pivotal moment in his artistic development. The television performance in particular remains one of the most visually iconic moments from the '68 comeback special. Number 1. If I Can Dream. 1968. How could Elvis's passionate plea for peace and equality miss the top 10? Recorded just months after Martin Luther King Jr.'s assassination, If I Can Dream featured some of Elvis's most committed vocals ever recorded. Despite its powerful message and Elvis's extraordinary performance, the single peaked at pound 12, respectable but below expectations for the conclusion of his triumphant 1968 NBC comeback special. The song represented a bold artistic statement for Elvis, moving beyond entertainment into social commentary during one of America's most turbulent periods. Written by W. Earl Brown specifically for the television special, If I Can Dream allowed Elvis to express his feelings about the troubled state of the nation. Those present during the recording session described Elvis's unusual level of involvement and emotional investment, requiring numerous takes until he felt he'd captured the right feeling. Studio personnel reported that Elvis recorded the song at 4 a.m. after the regular session had concluded, deciding spontaneously that he needed to revisit the material when most of the crew had already departed. The resulting performance featured some of his most passionate singing, with engineer Bill Porter later noting that Elvis was physically exhausted by the final take, having poured everything into the performance. The relatively modest chart performance puzzled Colonel Tom Parker and RCA executives, who expected the high-profile television exposure to propel the single higher. Music historians have suggested that the song's message may have been too direct for some radio stations during the politically charged atmosphere of 1968. Additionally, the length and quasi-operatic conclusion deviated significantly from standard pop forwarding of the era. In subsequent years, If I Can Dream has been reassessed as one of Elvis's defining recordings, touting both his remarkable vocal abilities and his desire to create meaningful art beyond commercial considerations. The television performance, featuring Elvis in a white suit delivering the song with raw emotion, became one of the most iconic moments of his career, despite the single's relatively modest commercial success. When an artist pours their heart into a performance, shouldn't it be recognized? Why do some of the most authentic artistic expressions fail to find commercial success? Could these flops actually represent some of Elvis's most genuine moments as an artist?